compelling reasons that she's presented that you might want to stay in Perth, the thing that you might need next is the services of a migration agent to assist you to stay permanently. So that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. Specifically who we are and what we do. And in this presentation I'm going to talk about Australia's migration program and overview. I did a presentation for the French Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and people were very interested in the kinds of numbers that come to Australia every year. So there's a little bit of information about that. Australian migration law and regulations, migration agents and their role, finding an agent, the fees you might expect to pay, which of course everyone who might want to make an application through an agent would want to know, other information and the specific services a migration agent might provide. There are 4,000 migration agents in Australia, by the way. Australia's migration program, an overview. The objective of the migration program is to meet Australia's economic and social needs. The annual migration target for 2013 to 14 is 190,000 permanent visas. 129,000 of those approximately are skilled migration, including independent skilled, employer-sponsored and business migrants. 60,500 places for family migrants who are sponsored by family members already in Australia, and 500 places for special eligibility migrants, including former permanent residents. The previous figures do not include temporary visas such as temporary work, including 457 or visitor visas, so obviously that's going to significantly increase the numbers that come to Australia every year. There are 20,000 additional places for humanitarian and protection visa applicants. This target assists Australia to meet its social obligations as a signatory to the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. And I thought I'd mention that because there is a lot in the media at present about overseas arrivals and refugees. Business innovation and investment category was introduced in 2012, including the significant investor, which Robert mentioned earlier, and basically all visas have criteria, but this one indicates that if you've got really a lot of money, your English doesn't have to be very good, there aren't many age restrictions, and you don't even have to live in Australia for very long. It's 160 days. There's been one, as far as I know, there's only been one of those granted, and you might guess to which national that was. It was a Chinese toy manufacturer. Are there any more, Robert, as far as you know, that have been granted? Can't talk about it. Okay, so Australian Migration Law Framework. The primary legislation is the Migration Act 1958. It contains the broad framework for the regulation of migration to Australia. So who can stay, how many, and how long. Migration regulations is a secondary piece of legislation, and it contains the details of over 140 visas within our system. The regulations cover the information you need to know about specific criteria for each individual visa. And then, of course, the Department of Immigration, responsible for processing and policy development. Migration law is extensive and complex legislation which is constantly changing. Because of this, the migration law profession has evolved significantly over the last 20 years. Interestingly, the Migration Act contains Part 3, and a provision within that structure, our legal migration structure, is that anyone who uses their knowledge and skill in migration law and procedure to advise or assist with a visa application and other migration matters must be a registered migration agent. There are some exemptions that apply. Part 3 of the Act is dedicated to the law governing migration agents specifically, including how migration assistance is provided, the appointment of the Office of the Migration Agents Registration Authority, or MARA, to regulate the migration profession, standards of professional conduct and accountability to clients through the Code of Conduct, and maintaining the integrity of the profession. The qualifications one must hold to practice as a migration agent in Australia is either a legal practicing certificate or a bachelor degree and completion at minimum of postgraduate qualifications in migration law and practice, and registration with the Migration Agents Registration Authority. I will mention at this point that migration agent is actually on one of the skilled occupations list. So if you want to do some study as a migration agent, there's a provision for you to be able to stay in practice. Continuing requirement for migration agents to practice include annual re-registration, continuing professional development, so we have to complete 10 points of education every year on changes in migration law and other relevant matters, compliance with the Code of Conduct. So when you use a migration agent, you should receive that document which outlines the standards, and we must have a record of successful outcomes for clients. In other words, if we submit too many vexatious applications, in other words, applications that have no likelihood of being approved, there's a risk of being deregistered. And all of this system has been put in place to protect consumers that use the services of migration agents. Hopefully that's supposed to make you feel a lot more confident. However, it is very complex selecting an agent, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about that. So in Australia, it is unlawful to provide migration law advice or assistance unless you are a registered migration agent. The Australian government has no jurisdiction over unregistered agents working outside of Australia. And as migration agents, we do often have inquiries from clients who have lodged applications using offshore agents that have been unsuccessful for whatever reason. And that makes it very difficult for them. But also, as you might have gathered, if you've done some research about staying in Australia, that it's also very, very expensive. The migration and visa services provided, preliminary assessment of visa eligibility and visa options. So we would always look at what your goal is in terms of your migration status in Australia and find the best option that's suitable for you. And starting off with the one that will give you permanent residency up front, if that's, in other words, the most favourable option for you and what you want to achieve. Advice on migration law and procedure, preparation of visa applications and visa lodgement, advice on employer sponsorship and monitoring and compliance. We work a lot with companies also looking at their personnel recruitment and retention strategies and how they might employ overseas workers as part of that strategy within their company. And one of them in particular is through working holiday visas. Employers do like employing working holiday visa applicants because, or holders I should say, because it gives them the 3 to 4 months to see them in the workplace and test their skills and experience. So it's certainly a good way of getting employer sponsorship. Assisting applicants with proposals to establish, operate or invest in businesses in Australia, and liaison with the Department of Immigration and Citizenship and other government departments and authorities. Certification of documents, representation of clients before courts and migration review proceedings, and assistance with requests for ministerial intervention. Now, finding a migration agent, I don't know how many of you have actually been to these sites, but I did. Have many people gone to them? Have you been able to hear me well? Oh, I just realised the volume went up quite a bit when I got closer. Have any of you been to the Migration Agents Registration site? If not, I'm just going to give you a quick demo. So how to find an agent. This is the Migration Agents Registration Authority, which registers migration agents, of course, as well. And you can easily go to this facility, find an agent. And then, if you don't know what you're looking for, these are your options. You either need to know the migration agent's name, which is obviously very difficult for someone overseas. In particular, we get a lot of inquiries from people overseas, and by the way, it's at least tripled for Italians in the last year or to 18 months, and you probably won't be surprised why. Or the migration agent's registration number, the business name, or the business location. So what we find often is that somebody, if they want to come to Perth, they'll type in 6,000, search, and then all the agents that operate from Perth will come. Now Perth CBD, those 6,000, not the outer suburbs, and the names will come up there. And then you can find out a little bit more information about them. So where they're based, whether they've got overseas offices, and that's listed down there. But what I do want to draw your attention to is this, the MAN, which is the Migration Agent's registration number. And the critical information you want to get from that is the first 2 digits, because that will tell you how long an agent's been registered. So for example, I was registered in 2007. So obviously if those first 2 digits are 1, 3, you'll know that they've just been registered. So that will impact on obviously the fees that you're going to pay as well. Now the other thing is, if somebody's searching from overseas, search again, so the location, country, there it is. So I can type in Italy. And all the agents registered, Australian registered agents who have offices in Italy will come up. So as you can see, there are 5 of us, most of us know each other and work together when we can. Now, I've just got to get back to my slides now. Here we are. Now, the other thing that particularly Adriana said, that the consulate gets a lot of inquiries, not just how to find an agent, but what you might expect to pay. So as part of our re-registration process every year, we also have to fill in a sheet which outlines what our average fees are for particular services that we provide. So, and this is the latest one that's been compiled by the Migration Agents Registration Authority. And you can see that for an employer-sponsored visa, you might expect to pay between $2,750 and $5,000. Now that's just the fee for the migration agent. Do bear in mind that that might not encompass all the skills or all the services that you want. For example, if you also want that agent to assist you with a skills assessment, that would be extra. If you also want that agent to assist you with a state sponsorship application, it could be extra. Now, I'm not saying it is, but bear that in mind because you will get quotes that are significantly higher than these figures. For business temporary, such as the 457 between $1,500 and $3,500, that's just for the visa application part, not the business sponsor. There's a completely separate fee for that. General skilled migration between $1,500 and $4,000. Business skills entry between $3,850 and $10,000. Now, I've certainly heard of business skills migrants paying up to $120,000. So it depends for the service of the migration agent, because it might mean that that agent actually has to go overseas to have a look at the systems and processes within the business to make sure that they meet the criteria. So it can be quite complex. Family migration up to $3,850, and then for students $400 to $1,800. How does that sound in your experience so far? A lot, it's a lot. And this doesn't include fees to the Department of Immigration. So, for example, a partner visa, if it's lodged onshore, is $3,975. So you're already looking at, $6,000 to $9,000 just for that part, without, health assessments and all the other things, translations of documents into English, which can be quite expensive as well. Now, I'm hearing lots of sighs from this part of the room. So, what should the agent provide a client when they enter into an agreement? The minimum should be a service contract. Once you've decided that you want to engage that agent to work with you and be your legal representative. So, the service contract outlines the terms and conditions of the engagement, including that a case assessment has been undertaken and what the chances are of success. Obviously, a migration agent can't guarantee success because that ultimately is the decision of the Department of Immigration, and that was the same as what we heard from Ivan in terms of the skills assessment. So there are lots of little rocks to get you to that stage of lodging an application. The kinds of services that you are going to provide, a full fee schedule which should include the agent's fees, Department of Immigration charges, and including a payment structure, so how you're going to have to pay the agent. Now, there are a number of different ways agents do it. Some just charge by the hour, others charge in blocks, specific an amount for each individual service. We actually charge an upfront fee, and generally 50% upfront and then the remainder at lodgement time. So, and we find that works a lot better for clients as well as us, because you get unlimited, advice on the phone rather than being billed for every time you make contact and have another question. So, client notes as well should be included in the agreement, which outlines whether there are any circumstances where you might get a refund. That the agent operates a client account which protects your funds. They sit in the client account until the services have been performed, and then you are sent an invoice. And very importantly, how an agent might terminate a contract with a client. And that might be that you make several requests for information, you don't get it, then you can terminate after a certain number of requests. Or whether you might suspect that there's fraudulent information being provided. What are the benefits of engaging the services of an Australian migration agent? We have access to legal databases and the resources including policy and procedures, manual used by case officers within the department to assess applications and apply the legislation. You will be aware that there's a requirement to undertake continuing professional development to maintain currency on legislation, the skills and knowledge. We must maintain high service delivery standards, and we must re-register annually. And as I said, agents can be sanctioned or deregistered. So the Migration Agents Registration Authority certainly promotes feedback from clients on the services and particularly complaints, and we believe that is very important because it weeds out any unscrupulous providers, which are few, fortunately, but you never know. So if you would like to contact us, here's our address. We're also at 140 St George's Terrace, Perth, and actually in our lift we can't get, the lift goes straight up to 14, and now we know why, because there's all these other government departments or other businesses that we don't have the opportunity to stop. Italy and France, and that's all from me, but I do look forward to your questions. Oh, and my job's very interesting, and I get to go to wonderful places. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Josephine. Now, I apologize for running a bit late, but all our presenters have kindly agreed to stay with us for a question and answer session. So, any question to our experts this morning?